Mark, welcome to Taiwan On.
Good to be here, my man. I
All
was going to
right.
call you Mark since you called me Mike right there for a second.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So, Mark, where are you at right now?
I liked it.
Good, good. Where are you at right now, Mark?
I am sitting, I'm home for the week. I'm home for the week and I'm sitting on the shore of a lake in Southwest Michigan.
Oh, cool, cool. That's awesome, and we're very pleased to have you. So, Mark, you were in Minnesota not too long ago, fishing with Seth Fighter. You and I visited earlier today on the phone, and you've spent some time up here. Tell us your impressions of bass fishing in the Midwest, particularly here in Minnesota.
I honestly, I've made this comment. I think that Minnesota is exponentially one of the top five, not even five. I think it's Minnesota is one of the top three states in the country. I think really the best fishing in our country, and there's a lot of good states, Mike,
Mm-hmm.
but I think Texas, New York, and Minnesota, for the simple fact, the majority of the lakes are pristine. They leave the vegetation, and when you combine all of the great smallmouth fishing you guys have, it's parallel with the largemouth fishing in the state of Minnesota. It's exceptional, and all of your viewers know that.
Right, right. And here's the crazy thing, Mark. We're still a walleye state largely. I mean, there's still a pretty good population of anglers in Minnesota who ignore the bass, well, because they don't taste good. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are it needs to stay that way for eternity, I would say.
Right.
And the other thing is, Mike, heck, man, that's what makes it good.
Mm-hmm.
I live in it, being in Michigan, fishing is good here, but bass is number one. And I've seen really it's really weird we're talking about this. I've seen the last 24 months with the pandemic and so many people out fishing. The state of Michigan's hard now. I mean, you better be on your A game compared to, I hate to say it, 10 years ago, you could do whatever you want and catch them. It's a lot different now to where you don't see that pressure in Minnesota.
Right, right. So when you're here, you've been fishing with Seth, I believe, Seth Fighter, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And we decided it was right after, he won Angler of the Year,
Mm-hmm.
and I was pretty up close and personal with Seth before he won that title, all year. Outside of covering Seth for the Elite Series, we just hang out. We hang out a lot. And I said, man, after, that victory, he was hanging here at the house. I said, man, let's go somewhere we've not been. And we
Mm-hmm.
did that. We knocked out two shows. I did not name where I was at. I think I told you that, Mike. I
Yep.
called it Nowhereville, North America.
I like
And
that.
I promise you I'll be back. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So talk about, so I've known Seth a long time. Seth and I actually competed against each other, 15 years or so ago in what was the Silverado Pro-Am bass circuit. At that time, it was the premier bass fishing circuit in Minnesota and largely in our part of the Midwest. So I've known Seth for quite a while. Talk about Seth Fighter a little bit and, his rise now to stardom and how's he done it? I mean, Minnesota, we've got bass, like you said, one of the best bass states around, but we're not known for producing the Elite Series champions. And here we've got the Angler of the Year. Talk about that, if you would, Mark.
You, Mike, that's a very, very complex question.
Yep.
The thing that's unique about it really is the thing that's very unique about Seth. What you see is what you get. He doesn't look like your everyday pro. He doesn't talk like your everyday pro, and I have a lot of respect for that.
Mm-hmm.
But from a nuts and bolts standpoint, and on the water breakdown of Seth, it was almost a perfect storm because a lot of people looked at Seth as a smallmouth guy, him winning on Mille Lacs, winning on Lake St. Clair. Seth is equally as powerful in vegetation. If you look at
Mm-hmm.
Tonka and you look at all the lakes within 100 miles of your door right there, Mike,
Mm-hmm.
they fish a lot like southern reservoirs. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
the as far as the style of fishing, I think it was more a matter of time of Seth getting his feet under him on bodies of water he had not seen in the past and being comfortable outside of the Midwest. And look, to me, there's been trends to this, but to me, it generally takes 3 to 5 years. It's almost like a football team reading a defense.
Mm-hmm.
You need to see them once or twice before you can dominate them. And
Sure.
I think that is really, and the other side is, I really believe what happened on Mille Lacs a few years ago. I don't call it 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was when Seth went this way as far as his momentum, as far as his confidence, and
Mm-hmm.
I think you're seeing the perfect package right now.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mark, talk about something a little more in depth, if you would, that you just touched on, and that's the confidence factor. And I don't know what it is, why it seems like, and I can say this from my own personal fishing. I started as a guide, and it seemed like the more confident I got, the better the fish bit for me. And I think that's the same with tournament anglers. And I'm not sure why that is, but talk about the confidence factor, if you would.
Oh, I think what's weird is whenever Mike, gosh, that's another complex question. I
Sorry,
tape
man.
I tape a million shows a year on the water myself, whether I
Mm-hmm.
have a guest or I don't have a guest. And you always have every one of us has a preconceived notion when we get to a body of water of how we should catch them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the biggest mistakes your listeners, anybody that has ever picked up a fishing rod, when things go wrong, you tend to pull the pin on a hand grenade, throw it in your tackle compartment, and start using everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a beginner really does.
Mm-hmm.
Where, and this is on a smaller scale, but I live with a jig. Seth lives with a jig, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, if you really looked at his season this year, a lot of his damage was done exactly with a jig. And just having that, man, I'm not going to do what you're supposed to do on Lake Fork. I'm not going to do what you're supposed to do on the Sabine River. Places when he went to the St. John's early in the season, he fished confidently with lures and techniques that Seth grew up confident in.
Yep. Yep. So he's fishing to his strengths.
Absolutely. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the best way to put it. When
Mm-hmm.
you when you fish to your strengths, you've got your fastball in your hand, and you are looking for things that you're comfortable doing.
Right.
And I know, man, I know techniques that Seth, you don't see him shine very often. You don't see Seth out there, cranking a 20-foot plug a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I made this comment, Mike. I made this comment on the Elite Series with Tommy Sanders. I said, for the most part, what Seth put on the scales to win Angler of the Year, it was 5 foot of water and less in bodies of water that looked identical to the state of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, in actuality, Minnesota might not be that bad as far as a training ground for a national touring pro, is what you're saying. If I'm reading this right.
It, if you gave me a choice of any states right now to be the training ground, now don't get me wrong, the winters suck, but I think New York and I think Minnesota are prime playing grounds. But I don't want no part of it from Halloween until Easter. I don't want any part of it.
You know, Mark,
And that's coming from a guy from Michigan.
There you go. There you go. That's a pretty strong statement. You know, we had Wally Marshall up a year ago. We did a open water fishing segment with Wally, and I asked Wally, I said, Wally, have you ever been to Minnesota in the winter? He said, yeah, I made 2 trips. I said, really? He said, yeah, my first and my last. And I'm getting.
You know what's weird? I mean, look, Michigan ain't much better, brother.
Yep.
Trust me on that.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you,
Mike. Which is probably the reason. It's probably the reason I spend the majority of my winters now in South Texas. It offers what I'm into. It offers a lot more of what I dig.
Right. Let's talk, Mark, about Zona's awesome fishing television show. I host Fishing the Midwest TV. Our wheelhouse, I guess, is we go to top Midwest fishing destinations and we show our viewers ways that we say the everyday man can catch fish on those fisheries. Talk about your show and your philosophy of Zona's awesome fishing show a little bit, if you would.
You know, I never wanted a script. You know, I never wanted, hey, it's going to be 80 degrees, light and variable winds. Don't get me wrong. I like that when we get that. Mm-hmm. It was actually like that with Seth a couple weeks ago. But to me, always wanted, you know, for the past decade and a half, I wanted Zona's Awesome Fishing Show to be like when you wake up and you're like, dang, this is my only day off. Let's go grind. Let's go do it. And the other thing that I've really learned, Mike, is it's okay to show interceptions. It's okay to show, you know, when things don't go right. It's okay to show if you break off a 6-pounder on a boat dock. That's real stuff. And that's how I started doing Zona's Awesome Fishing Show, and hopefully that's how I'll end it.
That's cool. That's really cool. Okay, so not too long ago, you made the move to Lose as your rod and reel supplier. How come? And talk about that switch a little bit, if you would.
From a business standpoint, you know, I knew Lose made, just because I've had so many people in my boat that use Lose, I knew Lose made very high quality equipment. The other thing was, from a business standpoint, all Strike King and Lose are one company now, you know, to where they were not before. And I figured, look, man, I loved working with the people at Strike King. I wanted to work with them with Strike King and Lose. It just made good business sense to keep everything in one house, no doubt.
Sure. So talk about the development of the new Lose Signature Series. That's a new, for our listeners, our viewers, a new Signature Series, a line of rods, Bass Technique specific rods. Mark, as well as KVD, Greg Hackney, Mark Rose, Andy Montgomery had key roles in the design of those rods. Mark, talk about there's 4 spinning rods in this series that are Mark Zona rods. Talk about those rods, if you will, a little bit about the development, what goes into that, and then also the models as well, if you would.
You know, really what I wanted more than anything was, I've worked on spinning rods my entire life. I used to goof around with blanks back in my late teens to however old I am now, Mike. And to me, there was always, you know, what's weird is, and you know this, there's a lot of spinning rods that are too tight, too stiff. A lot are too loose, too soft. What I wanted out of those spinning rods, number one, I wanted power. If you're fighting a 5.5 pounder on Mille Lacs, where things go wrong a lot of times is that you have a rod that is underpowered. The smallmouth ends up having leverage on you, and you not having leverage on him. So my main thing was I wanted power. I wanted soft tip with power, but most of all, I also wanted lengths for big time leverage in wind, in waves, in big water. So what we decided to do is we did a 6'10", a 7-foot, a 7'2", and a 7'4", and each one of them, it's weird. We have names for them. There's a 722 Kraken Special, a 7'4" Power Finesse. Those are going to be your leverage rods. Mm-hmm. And then there's a 7-foot. It's an all-purpose, basically all around. And then a 6'10" shaky head and drop shot. But here's what I always say: don't ever pay attention. Like the tube Kraken Special, I love cracking a tube, but that rod is so good for power shotting with a 1/2 ounce drop shot. It's so good for throwing a caffeine shad, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The number one thing, if you really look at those rods, that is one of the reasons why I went with Lew's is they said, hey, build your wish list in a series of rods. And I think that's exactly what they did. It's unreal. When I started working with them to now, that rod, I put it in a lot of other, nutbag, hardcore, smallmouth, largemouth fishermen. It's just a very, very solid all-around series that you can afford. I'm very proud of them.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other key, Mark, is that it's a rod that you can afford. For me, there's a couple things. Number one, it's cool to be able, as an angler, to use the same rod that Mark Zona or Kevin Van Dam are using, or Greg Hackney or whoever. Plus, like, if I want to throw a frog and I'm not sure what rod to buy, well, Hackney's got one specifically designed for that, which is cool. But the other part that I love is it's a pro-driven product, but it's a product that everyday angler, for lack of a better word, can probably afford that rod as well.
Right. And what was really cool about, when I pick up Andy Montgomery's dock rod, or Kevin Van Dam's cranking rod, or Mark Rowe's swim bait, or Hackney's flipping stick, or a frog rod, mm-hmm. What went in behind that. One of the things that, man, I'm still a fan of this. I'm still mm-hmm. Granted, I've done all this a long time now, Mike, but when Mark Rose or Greg Hackney, when they gave me a call, they're like, man, your spinning rods, they are spot on.
That's awesome.
When I saw Andy Montgomery on TV using one of them in a tournament a couple months ago, mm-hmm. I know we got it right. I know we got it right.
Absolutely. Yeah. When those guys are using it, when there's money on the line, their livelihood's on the line, it probably doesn't get any better than a testimonial than that right there. So, Mark, if you would talk about reel selection along with those rods, what reels are you pairing them with?
Now, I will tell you one thing about that. Mm-hmm. I'll rewind. I'll rewind real quick.
Okay.
I'm sure Luz thought I was a handful. When we were going through the testing process. A lot of the engineers, when the first batch I got, I said, no. We got to do, a lot of things different. And I'm crazy about how a handle feels, where guide placement is, where your guide train is. Mm-hmm. So it was, here's what I can tell you is we did a lot of trial and error before it got to where they are now.
Cool. That's cool. And that's, again, how cool is that you get the rod, it's not where it needs to be, so let's fix it. Let's get it closer. And, again, as an average everyday angler, whatever you want to call it, it's really cool to know that there's that much thought and that much time spent in the development of those rods. So if you would now, Mark, let's talk reels.
Sorry, I had a little glitch there. We up?
Yep, we're up now. No worries.
Okay, go ahead. I missed that last part.
Okay, so I guess the question that I have is what reels are you fishing on those? Talk about your choice in the spinning reels, and then also on some of those other rods in the baitcaster lines.
I'm actually not able to talk about the spinning reels that I'm using right now because okay. Every single one of them I'm testing ones that I think you'll end up seeing probably in the next 10 months. Now, don't get me wrong. I've accidentally shot some pictures and video where they're laying in the background, and I've got a talking to about that. But outside of the prototypes that I'm using, right now, the new Hyper Mag again, solid quality. The Hyper Mag spinning reel, it's light. I like they really worked on the drag system in the new Hyper Mag. That's something that we're working on in these prototypes. I'm a freak about a very, very soft drag.
Mm-hmm.
And from those spinning reels, when you go in to me, this time of year especially, I love the Pro TI series and the Hyper Mags on the bait cast side, but the Pro SP, the Lose Pro
Mm-hmm.
SP, that dock skipping reel, I shot a show up in Minnesota alone a couple of weeks ago, skipping boat docks. Look, man, I grew up skipping boat docks, with bait casters, 20-pound fluoro, 50-pound braid, and that's a challenge, Mike. That's a challenge for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and that reel truly makes you better at skipping docks.
Oh, it does. It does. The other thing about that reel, and maybe it's just my hand, Mark, but it seems like that reel was built to fit in my hand. Do you feel the same with that thing?
Absolutely, and that's really one of the things that you get from that. It's a light, smaller, compact reel, and one of the reasons that reel is smaller is how shallow that spool is. That spool is not a big, deep, like a cranking spool.
Right.
It's a very, very shallow spool. And I'll be honest with you, I do a lot of, besides skipping, I do a lot of target frog fishing. I mean, that's not launching up in rice or launching in cheese. I'm talking shallow target frog fishing. That reel is exceptional for that.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. That makes an awful lot of sense. Yeah, that's a sweet reel, and there's another one that you don't have to break the bank to get into that reel either.
Right. That's one of the great things. And I've been with some fantastic companies throughout my career. It absolutely, the products that Luz has introduced really the last 24 months, in a very trying time to introduce
right?
New products to all the consumers, because the whole world fishes now, and it's very hard to get products. I give the crew at Luz a very big hats off, and being able to market them through a pretty challenging time.
Sure, absolutely. Mark, let's switch gears for a little bit here. I know, is there a day that goes by, or maybe an hour that goes by, that Mark Zona doesn't think about smallmouth fishing?
Dude, if I turn this camera around, I'm staring at my lake, and I'm not kidding. Mike, I saw one bust like 10 minutes ago, and I'm like, oh boy, it's gonna go tonight. No, I mean, man, that's how I grew up. I remember the first, when you're a kid, that 5-pounder is the most elusive one. I remember the first 5-pounder I caught it on. Of all things, I caught it on a firecracker tube. I was probably 13 years old in the mid 80s, and it was to this day I could tell you what the weather was like, what the sky was like, and since that day I'm a freak about it. I'm a total freak about it.
Cool. So, if you will, Mark, share. We're moving into now this time here in Minnesota in the next couple weeks. We're going to have these first really cool nights of the fall, and things are changing in a hurry. And for me, it's shifting back to smallmouth time. Talk about fall smallmouth fishing. I know you've had some experience on Mille Lacs and some of these other bodies of waters. Give us a little quick tutorial. What should we be doing as we move here into September, and how can we catch them, and where should we look?
you know, in all honesty, to me, the best time of year to catch trophies is pre-spawn, early pre-spawn, and fall. You know, you're looking at your guys' fall's a little bit different, but really the month the month of October is when things go down all the way into November. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think November, if you can still get out, that is some of the best big fish hunting time of year. This is really weird, Mike, but in the state of Minnesota, it's a little bit different from other places I fish. A lot of places I fish, smallies in the fall, they like high skies, a pretty good breeze, maybe 10 miles an hour. The one thing I learned in Minnesota, them big ones, man, them groupers, they like it nasty in the fall. They like really, really nasty weather. The other thing, you know, obviously be safe, get out, you know, but don't wake up and say, man, it's blowing 20 and it's 40 degrees and spit and sleet and snow. To me, those are the days. That's when the magic can happen. The only other thing that I'll tell you is smallmouths have got a bad rap for, you know, throwing little baby tubes and hair jigs and drop shots and Ned rigs. And I get it, man. Here's the reason why. You're gonna get bit. The best, the best thing I could tell somebody that wants to catch a giant, throw big things. In the fall, I throw a lot of Mega Dog topwater baits.
Wow.
I throw a lot of real heavy wobbleheads, tungsten wobbleheads. The other thing is, man, you know, if you're as nuts as it sounds, is huge swim baits, umbrella rigs if they're legal. If there's one thing that I live by is don't underestimate what a smallmouth can put in his mouth. I've seen it. I have seen it many times. He will devour a 9-inch perch with his eyes closed. One of the things this is weird we're talking about this. When the last time I was on Mille Lacs, I was done taping. I was goofing around alone, actually with a buddy, and I started throwing an 8XD, a 10XD. Mike, that's a bait that is this big, right? It's this big. My gosh, had they never seen a crankbait that big on that lake ever?
Really?
I was bummed because my camera crew was gone, but that just shows you in the fall, throw something that where you're like, man, I'm uncomfortable. This thing is so big. It could be the best bait of the entire fall.
That's cool. That's really cool. And that's some great advice that, you know, we don't hear a lot here. Like you said, you know, we're conditioning Ned rigs and drop shots and all that stuff. But to catch those big giants, what you're saying is we need to upsize. Any other tidbits you can share with us regarding that?
You know, the one of the main things that I always say about big rogue smallmouth, big ones. I'm not talking 4 or 5 pounders, man. I'm talking when you get into the 6 to 7 pound range or bigger. They generally roll alone. 4 pounders, they like hanging together, man. 3 pound, everybody plays nice, but it's almost like a big smallmouth is a lot like a big buck. You know what I mean?
Big white
big
tail.
Buck, a mature buck does not like hanging around 3.5-year-olds. You don't see it.
Right.
Absolutely. A smallmouth is identical to that. When they get past that 6 pound range, and here's what I'll tell you. When I need to catch a big, I had to catch a big one for a protein journal last year. It's weird we're talking about this. It was for a protein journal, and it was, gosh, end of the day, and we needed a giant. And I always say this is when you think you're fishing shallow in the fall, go shallower. Go shallower. Those fish in the fall, there are just strange rogue giants that will stay up there as long as they can tolerate it, in generally into the mid 40s. They roll alone, but I caught one just under 7 pounds on a protein journal last October, and I'm not kidding. I'm here to tell you it was in 18 inches of water, and it was the only one I caught within 2 miles.
Wow. Wow. That's a big buck wandering by himself.
It's a big buck. It's a big buck that does not like playing nice with everybody else.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. That's cool. Mark, this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Love to be on anytime. Have a great one, and I'll see you the next time I'm in Minnesota.
Hey, Mark, I'm gonna take you up on what we talked about earlier today. Have you up, and maybe next summer we can get you on a television episode up here. That'd be awesome.
Sounds good. Let's just not talk about what lake we're on.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. We'll catch up with you again.
Love it. Thank you again.
You bet.